Hey Adam, how you doing?
Hey mate, how are you? Good to be here, Brent. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm stoked to have you on. Hey, we've never met before. We've never spoken before. This is kind of really bizarre, don't you think?
It is, it's like kind of like a blind date, but with an audience.
Yeah, fantastic. I like it. I like it. I like it. Imagine that going on a blind date and having an audience. How uncomfortable would that be? Tell me, what do you do? Oh, fascinated.
Oh, look, lots of stuff actually. So I guess 25 years as startup entrepreneur. So that was the first part of my adult life, I guess. So none of that was tech related actually at that point. So that was all kind of, ran a very large global athlete management company, and then was in sports travel, and then was in sports events, and
Wow.
done a whole variety of things in the sports industry. And then left to start My Vote, which became one of the world's foremost democracy movements, underpinned by blockchain technology. We were the first blockchain voting platform in the world. We spun out Horizon State, which ended up winning a World Economic Forum Tech Pioneers Award, which previously Facebook and Google had won. And these days I find myself still very much in the democracy space. So, My Vote's now moved to the UK and rebuilding there. I'm building the Pledge, which is a technology platform, a different kind of voting platform for here in Australia. I'm writing a book right now. I'm on a web TV show. I'm in a documentary movie at the moment. But my day job, where I go every morning, is Swinburne University, where I'm the Director of Global and Strategic Innovation.
Dude, what a guy. Oh, this is fantastic. Unreal. Where do I freaking start? Great to have you on, mate. In terms of your tech background and what you've been able to achieve so far is really credible. So you're at Swinburne Uni day in, day out, and then you've got all this other stuff that goes on. You've been an entrepreneur for 2 or 3 decades, or I probably should say all of your life, right? Because I think entrepreneurs are born these days.
Yeah. Look, my first business was 18, straight out of school. So it's, the first thing I did was start a business.
Yeah. What business was it? What were you doing?
It was athlete representation. We were one of the first in the world that was focused on extreme sports. So, pre-X Games, pre-Tony Hawk skateboarder, we were doing surf, skate, snow, motocross. And then that business, eventually I sold it to a public company in London. And part of that deal was that I had to remain for 5 years as the CEO. And my condition was that they had to move our headquarters to the US. And so I moved over to the US for many years and grew that business significantly there.
Wow.
And eventually sold back to my partners. And then my partners ended up selling it to Octagon and IMG. And now it's at Wasserman Media Group, which is now one of the largest athlete management firms in the world. But so, when you look back at the heady days of the X Games, 99, 2000, that kind of period,
Yeah.
we managed many, many, many of the medalists at the 2000 X Games, which was my last there.
Yeah, epic. I'm a massive surfer, skateboarder. I love mountain bike riding, love snowboarding. So X Games, you're speaking my language, and then combine that with tech and then managing athletes. One of my really good friends is actually a professional base jumper, won world champion, did some Australian skydiving stuff. His name's Chris Dukes McDougall. He lives over in Switzerland now, so he's a pretty impressive character and an absolute funny guy. But he was around that time, he was doing his thing. So I'm not sure if you've come across him at all.
Back then, base jumping wasn't as big as it is now. And so it really, the big ones back in the day was surf, skate, snow, and then BMX was starting to emerge and motocross was starting to emerge.
Yeah, okay.
We were right there. I left right at the intersection. So like the last pivot we made in the business before I left was to move into Hollywood. And so a lot of businesses that were our contemporaries and our competitors were moving into the merchandising space. And so as, they were spinning out a lot of sneaker companies and apparel companies and surf wax companies with the athletes that they managed. We did a little bit of that. It wasn't really the focus. The focus for us was to move into Hollywood. So we did the first ever external joint venture that CAA had ever done, which is the largest talent agency in Hollywood. So they manage, Oprah Winfrey and Brad Pitt, Steven Spielberg and everybody you can imagine. And so my last probably 18 months in the US was spending almost every day in Hollywood in their office. And we did some really interesting deals. We moved, one of the deals I did was move the World Skateboard Tour from ESPN to Fox Sport at the time, in a deal that had never been done before in Hollywood like that, where we actually gave a part of the tour to the network. So that was something that they said couldn't be done. And I think one of the last deals I did with my with my co-founder, and she was the head of athletes, was we did the first Nike skate shoe deal. So when P-Rod put out the first skate shoe ever from Nike, that was a year's worth of work for us to get our athlete with a pro shoe, and that shoe has now sold millions and millions and millions of shoes. So, and that was before he'd even won a medal at X Games, and now he's an X Games superstar. So, they were good old days.
Amazing. We've got a lot of things in common, like from the good old days, and I reckon we need to chat at another time as well. So, okay then. So you're in the, what was the actual passion though around, getting into that space in the first place? What drew you to it?
There was no passion, to be honest. So
okay.
I was a bit of a pragmatist. I did really badly at school, at high school.
Yeah.
I really failed high school because it didn't interest me the way my brain works. I don't work in that computerized way of thinking. And so, I had to challenge things and take them apart and kind of look at them from every angle. And at high school, that's not what they want. They don't want people questioning. They just want you to learn in a very particular way. So did really, really poorly there. Just scraped through into a university course, and one that I wasn't really interested in doing. And so I just happened to be lucky that a guy that I went to school with, who was then a world-ranked inline skater, rollerblader, came to me and said, look, you've always been into sport, and, you're in sports administration, sports management now at university, which I'd literally done a day. Some of my friends could use some help. Can you look at this contract for me? I looked at the contract. I've always been interested in the law and language and the way language is constructed. And I come from a family of lawyers, and my grandfather was a judge. And so looked at the contract, added a little bit of value, didn't know what the fuck I was doing, but added a little bit of value, I think. And he said, hey, you know what? All the boys on tour could really use this. And a business was born. It was purely by accident. And when we got into the industry, it was a $12.5 million industry. And when I left, it was a $13 billion industry.
Wow. Yeah. That's, all that, X Games and that, countercultural subculture sports, all of a sudden just shot up mega. Like, didn't they in the late 2000s or early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, massive shift. And like you said, it's huge.
And I remember when the X Games got to LA, probably, one of my proudest moments of that business back in the day, I don't know if you know, when it moved to LA for 2 or 3 years. It was at the Staples Center, which is the home of the Lakers.
Yeah.
Opposite the Lakers stadium in downtown LA, there's a very famous old hotel called Hotel Figueroa, which is about, if I had to guess, about 12 or 13 stories high. And there's a big parking lot next to it, so you could just see the side of the building. And for years there had been, there are always paintings of Lakers people, like 13-story, Kobe Bryant and Shaq.
Yeah.
And when the X Games came, we got there, and it was a 13-story Eric Costin, who is the Michael Jordan of street skating, who was our client. And so to walk down in downtown LA, I lived not too far away, just down on the water at Manhattan Beach. But to drive into downtown and see your client on a 13-story building was a pretty amazing thing.
I reckon. Now, Eric Costin was in one of the original Tony Hawk Pro Skater game, wasn't he? If my memory serves me correctly.
Yeah, I mean, Tony Hawk is the most famous skater in the world, primarily because of that game and primarily because of the 17.
Absolutely.
But Eric, Eric was the Michael Jordan of street skating. He's a genius.
Yeah.
He's an icon. And so he was the biggest skater we ever managed. And then he introduced us actually to Paul Rodriguez, who kind of became in some ways his protege and became in his own right an X Games superstar and arguably the best street skater in the world. And so originally Nike came to us and said, we want Eric Costin. And to his credit, he's a man of great value and ethics. And he had a long-standing relationship with a skate shoe company. And he said, I'm not prepared to go to Nike. It'd be a sellout for me. But P-Rod at the time was about 14 and he didn't have a deal at that point. And so they said, well, if you don't get Eric Costin, who's going to be the next Eric Costin? And we said, P-Rod's going to be the next Eric Costin. And so he finds himself with a, multi-million-dollar shoe deal as a 14-year-old. And that's how it all started.
Amazing. I remember when the Tony Hawk game came out, I would have been 22, 23 years old. I think I got the demo off the pizza box, if my memory serves me correctly. And now they've just done a remake, the remastered version of Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2. And I know a lot of hours. A lot of hours are invested into that game back then. And you talk about some of the street skating influences around Eric Costa, and go back to Rodney Mullen and some of the stuff that he used to do, and how he learned to skate like in his garage, literally nuts. And you look at some of the contemporaries now, and I think, what's his name, Andy. Andy. He was down in Chelsea not long ago in Australia, and he was just like, this guy's a free. He's like, it's kind of like the Rodney Mullen of today. Andy, so I can't remember his name. But anyway, so
the great thing about those days, I mean, it was amazing to be around the Costons and the Hawks and so forth. And back in the day, it was just like, everything was, every weekend was party central. So, you'd have events in a different city in the world. You'd be going to a skate world championship in Vegas, and then you'd be going to an inline championship in Germany. And then like every weekend it was somewhere different, it was something exciting, but, and everything was tied into, music. So Pink was at all the after parties, and we had private concerts with the Beastie Boys at the end of an event. And like, it was amazing. It was an amazing period of time. For me, probably the most pleasing and rewarding part was actually seeing so many Australians make it through on the world stage. So to see Renton Miller be number one in the world as a skater, he used to skate in St Kilda right around the corner from where I used to live, and to see Steve McCann, who we found as a 13-year-old, win an X Game, multiple X Games medal in, BMX vert and dirt and street. And these are people who never would have been found. They just, the Aussie battlers out there and absolutely taking it to the world. It was magnificent.
Did you have anything to do with the Pappas brothers?
Oh, look, I knew them early on, really early on.
Yeah.
Mainly because they were particularly good friends with Renton at the time. And we never managed the Pappas boys, but we managed Renton for a really long time. So we were kind of around it, but I didn't know them well.
Yeah. The Interesting Story is a great documentary. I can't remember what it's called. Fascinating, mate. Fascinating. Yeah. Oh, it's unbelievable. So that was your kind of like early chapter of entrepreneurship, or just one of the things you did. And then I don't know, I had a bit of a look. You in the esports space? Is that what I saw? And
yeah, look, I'm the soon to be departing chairman of Mogul.
Okay.
I'm a non-executive chairman. I don't work in the business at all. It's not my thing, but yeah, I serve on the board. It's around governance. It's around strategy. We have an amazing board now at Mogul, and an amazing executive team. They're doing a terrific job in building really interesting product that finally the world is starting to take some notice of. And I get to sit on a board with people like Kate Vale, who is, the former CEO of Spotify and head of Google down here, and Ken Adams, who's a co-founder at Canva. And it's an amazing board. I really enjoy being on it.
Impressive. Hey, so what was that? Was the transition into that? What was the connector? You're over in the US, you're doing your thing, and then what happened? You came back to Australia. What was the conduit?
Yeah, so after I got out of the business, I came back to Australia. I took a little bit of time off. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I decided I'd go to university for the first time properly. So I never got an undergrad, but I came back and I did a Masters of Entrepreneurship after a decade, more than a decade, of actually being in entrepreneurship.
What do they teach you? What does a Masters of Entrepreneurship teach you? Like, what did you learn that you didn't know already?
Well, to be honest, I mean, a lot of the stuff, because I came in not as an undergrad student, because I came in as
a mature age.
Yeah, mature age industry person.
Yeah.
There was a lot of stuff that I didn't learn because I had done it. I'd experienced it myself. But there were things around, problem definition, understanding market and verifying data, being able to map appropriately your horizons, stuff that I was doing, but I didn't know that I was doing it, and I could do it better. You kind of do it practically in it, but you actually understand why you were doing it and how to do it efficiently and how to make sure you extract the most value out of those processes was a bit useful. And to date, I still say that the best thing that I got out of that master's was actually the network of people I did it with.
Sure.
Unbelievable, who are friends to today, and that was nearly 20 years ago. So yeah, it was terrific. And ironically, now I'm at the university where I did that master's, and I'm involved in the program and can be involved in making sure that we extract the best value, and that the accelerator programs and stuff that I'm intimately involved with at the university to help companies spin out, also get the benefit of both the formal education that you can have through the university, but being surrounded with a whole lot of amazing mentors and leaders that we've put together to make sure that those young can, not have to make the same mistakes that we've all made for the last 30 years.
Yeah, and there's been a few mistakes, and some would say that you need to actually make all the mistakes to get all the lessons right and to grow and develop even more. It's, mate, we've got a lot. It seems like we've got a lot in common. I failed. Well, I got 32 out of 100 for VCE, year 12. And then I got accepted into university to do primary school teaching at it was about 4 hours away from where I was living at the time. I was living with my mother. She'd divorced a couple of years earlier. She was really, really struggling. And I ended up getting offered a place at Deakin Uni for primary school teaching. I don't know where it was, but I said no to it. And then I ended up getting a job in IT as a store person as a 19-year-old when mum said, I've got no money left. You've got to go and get a job. And I was like, holy shit. But it was real. I remember getting my first paycheck and giving her half of the money that I earned. I earned like $720 for a fortnight, and I ended up coming. I go, there you go, mum. And it was kind of my real first taste of tech and getting into that. And then at 25, one of my bosses at the time, who was actually a father figure / mentor / massive influence on my life, even to this day, he said to me, you need to go and learn something. You need to go and learn how to think. And, I was very good practically, and I was able to get functional flow in the businesses that I was involved in or the jobs that I was doing at the time. But he said, you need to go and learn how to think. So here I was, 25, rocked up to Holmesglen TAFE in Moorabbin. I did an advanced diploma in international business, and I rock in. There's all these 18-year-old fresh out of school leaving, and I'm like, you little ripper, how good's this? And it was like for me going back to school. And I really, really enjoyed it. I learned heaps of stuff, but it was more of that practical application and the different people that I met along the way. And then after 18 months of completing my studies, I did an advanced diploma in international business. I did grad certs in marketing, blah, blah, blah. They said to me, how about you come and teach? Why don't you stay on and teach everything that you've just learned? Because I had heaps of high distinctions, which for me, I was an E+ student at high school. So it was like, yeah, why not? And that's how I kind of got into that space. So when you were sharing your story about Swinburne and how you got there, it was kind of like, hey, there's a few similar patterns. And then when you mentioned the surf wax business, I'm like, I got a surf wax business. So we've got a lot of little things under the surface that I love to explore with you down the track. What have you learned? What have you learned in that? What you've shared so far? What do you think you learned the most about in that time, in that period of your career?
Look, there are so many mistakes and there are so many learnings. It's just, I wouldn't even know where to begin. Every day is a learning experience. And I think one of the things as an entrepreneur, I often give speeches about entrepreneurship at business schools around the world. And the two things that I say are absolutely vital for any entrepreneur, and they've been huge learnings for me. One is that to be a great entrepreneur, the first thing you must have, you will never achieve really successful, consistent business growth without having self-awareness. That's the first most important thing. You have to know what you're not good at. You have to know what you are good at. You have to know when you're wrong. You have to be able to say, I don't know. You have to be able to empower your teams to be successful in their own right. And, a great part of leadership is building other leaders. If you just have followers, you're not a real leader. And so for me, that was a huge learning, because I think, a big part of the early entrepreneurship days when I was back in it 20 something years ago, it was just about this bullshit ego thing about I'm the founder and I'm the CEO and everything is about me and everything's about, and it's just not how you grow successful businesses. They can't work like that. If you're not creating environments where other people can thrive and everybody can bring their best selves to work, then you go nowhere. So that was a big thing for me. The other thing is, I think, and I talk about this a lot, is the mastery of cognitive dissonance. And this to me is, the best entrepreneurs I've met around the world, multiple billionaires I've met. This is the one thing that is unique about them and consistent about them, is the ability to understand when you have to lean this way and when you have to lean that way, where you're being pulled in different directions. And so, as an example, one of the things entrepreneurs find often is, I want to hold on to as much equity as I can, but I really need to bring in capital. And so how do you balance that? Because they're two completely conflicting ideas. And so the mastery of cognitive dissonance is to understand when you're in a place you're being pulled in different directions, and understand, because of where you're trying to go, where you need to be a little bit like this on this occasion and where you need to be a little bit like that on that occasion, and not think that there is one straight linear path, because it doesn't work like that. The other thing I think is about relationships. And so I've had partnerships that have been really healthy and fantastic, and I've had partnerships in business that have been really toxic and terrible. And so to understand who you need to be in business with, how to bring your best self to those relationships, how to nurture them and make sure that they're healthy, how to ensure that everybody is incentivized in the same way. All of that kind of stuff is an ongoing learning. But I'm a big believer that if you ever get to a point as a leader or as an entrepreneur that you're comfortable, you're in trouble. So it's always about wanting to challenge yourself a little bit more, wanting to learn a little bit more. And so, after many years of entrepreneurship and getting a master's and all that crap, I then went off and I did some study at Cambridge, some exec study at Cambridge. I'm currently doing an exec study course at Harvard. And so it's just constantly going, I think I know this, but I'd love to hear another perspective. And how are other people doing it? And maybe I've got an accent right, but I could get better at doing it. And so it's just constantly putting yourself into a place where you can grow and get better.
Yeah, mate, fantastic insights. Anyone listening to this, everything you're saying is like, I'm a massive believer in everything you're talking about. What about intuition? How important do you think intuition is for an entrepreneur?
Yeah, look, that's a really interesting one. So to me, it goes back to that question about, can you really teach entrepreneurship? Which, as somebody who comes from a university that teaches entrepreneurship, it's not a popular position when I say, no, you can't actually
That's
teach.
right, yeah.
There are skills that you can learn, absolutely. And there are processes and templates and systems and all of that. And that's fine. And there are case studies which can help inform you. I think the thing about entrepreneurs, real genuine entrepreneurs, is that they see things differently. And primarily that comes from a different risk profile. So their capacity to say, I'm prepared to back myself, even though nobody else would in this circumstance, might seem a little bit delusional to outsiders, but it's a burning belief, either that the opportunity is there and they can see it when nobody else can, or that other people can see it, but they don't have the courage to go and do it. And so I think there's a little bit of both of those things in entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And part of that is the intuition. It's the knowing that there's something here. There's something worth continuing to go after that might on the surface might not make a lot of sense. And so even when I'm dealing with my accelerator teams at the university, I mentor a lot of startups at the moment. You're always looking for validation. And so for me, the big thing about everything is data. Data doesn't lie. Emotions get in the way of a lot of good decision-making in business. To me, a good business is more than a series of good decisions. The only way you can make good decisions is with good data. And so if you're not constantly looking at your data, you don't really understand your business. That said, you can validate to a point, but only to a point. And some of it is just about going, the data tells me X, but I have a pretty good sense that Y is going to happen. And you back yourself. That's what being an entrepreneur is about. You don't want to do it in a way that is ill-informed, or that you take on more risk than you need to. But if you're not taking on any risk, then it's not entrepreneurship.
Yeah, sure. Isn't it, pushing that risk envelope and pushing it. And I've even noticed in my own journey, I don't know if you know, but I launched a company. It's called Techtify, just a tech reseller. Start of April, my fellow exec said to me, "You sure you still want to launch?" This COVID stuff was coming down, and I go, "Fucking nice." This is where your ROI on effort and what the work you do now, you'll get paid back 10 times in 6 to 12 months, because everyone's on the fucking defense. Everyone's been smacked. Go on the offense, make every fucking day count, and you are going to get some pretty significant ROI. So I'm just waiting. We're 4 months in, 147 days in. We've got 5 clients and just clicked over 300K in revenue. And I think for a startup out of the COVID, it's great, and I share very open. I share very openly on my Instagram story, and I'm very, very, very unique and very different. And my fucking levels of self-awareness off the fucking charts, like off the charts. So, I think it's helped a lot. But all the things you say, like about, the cognitive dissonance, in terms of where you're coming. What was the other one? There was the cognitive dissonance. There was the initial one was self-awareness. What was the third one again?
Yeah. And then, it's about relationships becomes the key thing. And so look, they all interplay, but I think in terms of what you just said, probably the most interesting success that I've had was also in an incidental piece of success in business. And it was one of the only times it wasn't my business. So I was the CEO, but I was appointed by I did my master's with in his family business. And had the business for a decade. And originally it started, he'd said, off the back of us doing uni together, he said, "Hey, can you And he was running, a nice little business that was doing about 1.3, 1.4 million a year. It was his family business. They've been around about a decade. And they had a nice small piece of the market, but a stable business that was driving good income. But I think he was yearning for something bigger and more substantial. And he originally came and said, "Look, can you do like a growth strategy for us?" Which I did. I didn't understand anything about the market at that point. I'd never worked in that space before, but I spent several months learning about it, looking at the data, looking at the numbers, looking at who was doing, where gaps might exist, built a strategy for them. I came back and said, "Look, can you run the business?" He said, "I'm going to stand aside." He was the chairman and CEO. He said, "I'm going to remain the chairman. I'll bring you in as CEO, and can you help grow this business for a period of time?" Which I didn't really have any interest in doing at the time. "I'll give you 2 years and then I'm done because I don't actually want to be doing this, but I can see there's a genuine gap here." And what was interesting was, as I took on that role, and it was a deeply involved, hands-on chair, and we had a great relationship. But it was right when GFC hit. So, GFC hits, no friggin' money. We're in a discretionary income business where it's a luxury, not a must-have. The world goes, "Holy shit, what are we going to do?" All of our competitors put all their money under the mattress and said, "We're saving it for a rainy day because we're going to get decimated in this market." And we made, to your point, we made a counterintuitive decision, but a very deliberate decision, that whilst everybody else was putting the money under the mattress, we were going to spend every cent we could find on marketing for the first time. Like any money we find, we were going to promote. And we figured it was a huge opportunity to market. Nobody else was there and nobody else was advertising. There was always going to be a portion of the market that was going to be able to afford our product. And we knew that when those people were looking, we wanted to make sure that we were the brand that they could find. And we grew exponentially in that year. So that year, we were the BRW fastest growing private company in the country.
Oh, yeah. Awesome.
Number one. Under 100. So, and we went from 5 staff to 60 staff with no debt, all just through organic strategic growth. We grew from about 1.3 million to 18 million in that period of time in 1 year in the GFC. And it's by being counterintuitive. It was by saying, if this is what the whole market is doing, it means that there's a lot of opportunity over there. We back ourselves to go after that. And we did. And in this instance, it paid off. In other circumstances, it might not, but we were really lucky. So I appreciate, the "Are you sure you want to start this business now?" thing, because it makes sense to anybody else, but it makes sense to you.
Oh, yeah. And look, mate, it's, funny you say that. It was in the GFC. I was in business back then. I owned another business. And like leadership in uncertain times, like people right now, especially, are yearning for connection. They're looking for strong leaders who walk their talk, who are values driven. And it's massive. And if you can lead now and really be congruent with who you are, deliver value, solve customer problems, and really do it properly, you're going to do pretty well. You've got to work and you've got to put in the effort, but you're going to do pretty well, aren't you? But leadership right now, don't get me started. We could talk about that for hours. Hours and hours. So you're at Swinburne. Innovation. What's going on? I love it. Yeah. I love it. Tell me more.
Yeah, look, it's a pretty exciting place to be. So Swinburne is a really unique, it's kind of like this amazing hidden gem in the university system, because we're much smaller than the Monashes and the Melbournes and Sydney, University of Sydney. But we have such deep expertise in Industry 4.0. So last year we won the Australian Business Award for 4.0, not for universities, for all businesses. And so we are deeply entrenched in the way tech integrates with society, with workforce, with industry. So whether it's AI, whether it's blockchain, whether it's advanced manufacturing, whether it's robotics, this is our bread and butter. This is what we do. And so all day long we're dealing with, it's an incredible privilege to be able to work with some of the best astrophysicists in the world and designing amazing space technology and 3D printing of graphene and materials that nobody else in the world is using, and working on stuff for, defense and for aerospace. And it's just, cutting edge blockchain, cutting edge AI and LM, and ML and working with, as a partner. It's an extraordinary place, because the role that I play in the university is the ability to put some of these things together to create new things, and to commercialize and launch what has been previously academic and research oriented activity into commercial activity. And that's really exciting.
Okay. Tell me more. I'm kind of a bit confused. So you said you mentioned you work with startups and entrepreneurs, but give me a little bit more detail about what
Yeah.
you're talking about then. Yeah, a bit more clarity.
So the innovation precinct, which is where I work,
Yep.
is the front door of innovation for the university. So its role is to do a few different things. The first is to bring industry in to engage in innovation at an academic level. So, for example, if we're doing AI research or blockchain research or machine learning or robotics, to bring in industry partners who can be benefited by that research, and then we can work together at building solutions for industry, for business, for the economy, et cetera, et cetera. So, for example, that might be working with Amazon in big data analytics as it relates to social impact, or it might be dealing with Boeing on a graphene part that it used to use different materials for.
Gotcha.
The other part of what we do at the Innovation Precinct is becoming a conduit for academics to launch their products. So we actually take researchers who come up with ideas that are genuinely unique and patentable, and we do that for them at the university. We patent them and we protect it all. Is then help them launch and teach them how to become business owners or founders, how to build teams around them so that they can take their ideas to market. At the moment, as an example, I can't get into the details because it's proprietary, but there are two groups in the area that are spinning out businesses that I'm helping them form right now. And so one of them has built an actual device that uses space technology for local market activity. And the other one is working on basically the way that we take data from space and crunch it in a particular way. And so both of those businesses will spin out. Swinburne will own a piece of those businesses, but the founders and the researchers will own the larger chunk of those businesses. And our job is to help them create commercial outcome from their research expertise. And then the third part of the innovation precinct is to run accelerators, pre-accelerators, actually businesses, startups. So it's what we call Swinburne Family. It's pretty common, I think, with most of the universities, but Swinburne Family is staff, students, and alumni. And if you fall into that category, staff, students, or alumni, and that can be alumni at any time, going back 30 years, 40 years. If you've Swinburne in any way or have a relationship, you can submit an application to be in our accelerator program. We give a number of teams each year $30,000 cash to launch their business. We give them a really intensive 12-week learning program, surround them with extraordinary mentors. So this year at the accelerator program, we had the managing partner at Pitcher Partners. We had the chairman of Seek. We had, all these amazing people who come in and add value to the partners. And then, we launched those companies. And so last year, as an example, we had 4 companies who went through the accelerator last year. One of them won multiple awards as the best circular economy business in the country in the first year that they launched out of the program. Another one has done massive deals in the US around using facial recognition for pharmacy dispensing of drugs to make it cheaper and more efficient for people who need regular pharmacy drugs to not have to go through the same protocols. It's much easier for them. So there's really interesting stuff around, and we get to work in a really diverse set of businesses. It's terrific.
And so how many entrepreneurs do you kind of have direct contact with a mentor at any one time through the uni? You'd have quite a lot.
Well, one of the side roles at the university for me is that I'm one of the entrepreneurs in residence. So apart from being a director of global strategic innovation, I'm also an EIR. Okay. And so as an EIR, I'm kind of on call all the time. So whether it's an academic, whether it's a student, whether it's a staff member, whether it's an alumni who wants to start a business, I reckon I would talk to upward of 30 startup founders a week, every week. And I would actively mentor probably half a dozen at a time.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. It can be challenging, can't it, when mentoring entrepreneurs and startups and business owners. I've done a fair bit of it in my time as well. And you find the ones that, they want to feel good about business and they want the thought of being a successful business person, yet they're not willing to do the work, or they're not even probably willing to do the internal work to get themselves right so they can go and execute right. And then there's the ones who have got it, and they're like movers and shakers, and you can see the twinkle in their eye, and you're like, I want to work with them, because you just know.
I agree. You know, really quickly.
You fucking bam. So I was running these. You go.
No, go, please.
I was running these programs with a number of different business owners. It was like an incubator program. There was like 12 people in it. And what I do is I also include adventure experiences so people can break through some of the limiting beliefs they might have in the adventure world, in experience. Like I'm talking about going surfing, for example. Like I could never do that because I'll get eaten by a shark. I go, oh yeah, that's an interesting limiting belief. Let's try. And you take them out and they go surfing and they like, I did it. And I'm like, of course you did it. I go, now tell me some one thing in your business right now, in your career right now that you're afraid of, but you sure do want to do it. And they'll bring it up and I go, well, let's have a chat. And you start having a chat to people, breaking down some of these limiting beliefs, rewriting with empowering beliefs, and then off they go. And it's like, you don't need to do much. And then like if there's a little bit of a shift or a little bit of a change in one area, it has a flow-on effect around 5 or 6 other areas as well. But it's that type of thing. So I really enjoyed it. But then it was the people who weren't willing to follow through and do the actions. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to build a portfolio of businesses in my stable. And then I'm going to mentor the people that I love and I'm passionate about and give them an opportunity to own their own business. So that's kind of the way I've kind of shifted in the past 2 years.
Yeah, no, look, I'm envious of you because you get to kind of pick and choose. At the university, my role is to let anybody walk in the door, which is good because
which is great.
You have to democratize that knowledge and people need to have access. And I'm not the only EIR there. There are some other unbelievable EIRs better than me. And so people choose, the kind of mentor that they're looking for and the kind of advice and who they get it from. I really come from a startup mentorship place of tough love. So I'm going to tell you the things that you need to hear, whether you want to hear them or not. And not because I want to hurt you, because I want you to be the best you can be. And sometimes entrepreneurship is just hard. And sometimes you need to hear you don't understand your market well enough. Or sometimes you need to hear that's just a fucking assumption. There is no evidence provided to give me a sense that that's actually true. Sometimes it's the business model is wrong. Sometimes it's you have no idea how you've done your pricing. Can you go out and please validate that for me before you go to market? Sometimes it's like you don't have the expertise to do this part of what your business is trying to do. Can you please go and find somebody who's an expert at that piece of technology because you're not it. And that's really hard conversations, but they're important because if they're serious about getting the best out of their business, it goes back to that self-awareness. It goes back to the cognitive dissonance. They have to make decisions that are tough for them. But if they're serious about the business, then they're the right decisions for them.
Yeah, definitely. 100%. Totally agree. And it's interesting, isn't it? Like, like you give people tough love and whether or not they're ready for it or not. And they're all ready for it. We're big adults, but I always make sure that I've invested a lot in their emotional bank accounts. And I make sure that they know that I've got their back 110%. Then when it comes time to swinging the big stick, they know it's for their better and they're more open to receiving it. And then just a little bit of love, a little bit of a cuddle and some help and show them what they need to do next. And off they go. And they're like,
that's it. It's a thump and a cuddle. If it's just thump all the time, it's going to get you nowhere. And if it's just cuddle all the time, it's going to get you nowhere.
Yeah.
But as you said, they have to know you're doing it because you genuinely want them to succeed.
Yeah, and you generally have to care, like generally innate as a mentor, a leader, a coach, whatever. You actually 100% you've got to love people, and you want to see other people do really, really well. You've got to be carrying that, don't you?
Absolutely.
But I think we could chat all day.
Probably could. I've got other things to do, I'm sure you do, but we could. There's lots to talk about.
I think we both do, mate. I just want to say thank you for coming on.
It was a great chat.
Yeah, it's a great chat, and I'm looking forward to catching up with you offline down the track. I'm sure we'll be able to do some stuff together, and I might learn a thing or two from you. So thanks very much. It's been great to have you on the show, bud, and we'll talk soon. All right.
Thanks for having me. It was terrific. Cheers.
Thanks.